the lone ship and the Council's threat. The stars burned cold and silent across the endless dark. Between them, a fleet the size of a continent drifted in formation. Thousands of alien ships, each one glowing with power, formed the Great Wall of the Galactic Council. Their metal bodies reflected light like blades of steel, stretching across the void. In the center of that armada, the Council's war flagship waited, vast, golden, and crowned with towers of weapons. Inside its command chamber, alien leaders sat on high thrones. Their faces were proud, their eyes filled with the certainty of victory. "Earth will answer today," the Supreme Chancellor said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "If they resist, they will be erased from history." Around him, alien generals nodded. They had crushed countless worlds. No one dared to stand against them. No one, until now. Then the silence of space broke. Out of the black, a single human ship appeared. It was small, too small. Against the size of the Council's armada, it looked like a child's toy floating in the ocean. The alien leaders stared at it, confused. Some laughed, others sneered. "This is their defense?" One general hissed, his scales glowing with mockery. "One fragile ship? They insult us," another spat. "They send a single vessel as if we are not worth their full strength." But the Chancellor leaned forward, his golden eyes sharp. "No," he said. "Humans are not fools. There must be a reason for this." On the Council screens, the image of the human ship expanded. It was scarred, patched with steel, carrying weapons that looked outdated. And yet, it stood firm, motionless, facing thousands. Inside the human ship, Commander Elias Kane sat in silence. His uniform was worn, his face pale from sleepless nights. But his eyes were calm, unshaken. Behind him, his small crew watched the screens nervously. They could see the alien armada, a wall of death, ready to erase them. "Sir," whispered his second officer, a young woman with trembling hands, "there are too many. They will destroy us in minutes." Kane did not answer at first. His gaze stayed locked on the Council fleet. His voice, when it came, was steady. "Numbers don't decide who wins. Resolve does." The crew fell silent, clinging to his words, like a rope in a storm. The alien flagship's transmission opened. A towering hologram of the Chancellor appeared inside the human ship's bridge. His voice was cold and cruel. "Humans," he said, "you are outnumbered. You are outgunned. You cannot win. Surrender your planet, surrender your people, and you may live as servants of the Council." Silence filled the bridge. The crew looked to Kane, waiting for him to speak. But he did not. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened, and he said nothing. The Chancellor frowned. "Do you mock us with your silence? You have no choice. One ship cannot stand against the Council." Still, Kane remained quiet. The alien generals laughed, their voices echoing across the Council chambers. "Destroy them," one demanded. "Make this fast. Show Earth what happens when they defy us." But the Chancellor raised a hand. His instincts whispered caution. He studied Kane's silent face on the hologram, and for the first time, unease touched him. The human was not afraid. He should have been trembling. He should have been begging. Instead, he stared back with eyes that carried something far heavier than fear. "Why send one ship?" the Chancellor murmured to himself. "What are they hiding?" On the bridge of the lone human vessel, the crew shifted nervously. Alarms blinked on their screens. Weapons locked onto their hull from every side. The Council fleet was ready to fire. But Kane only whispered to himself, almost too soft for anyone to hear. "They think fear is enough to win." The stars outside seemed to tighten, the silence growing heavy with expectation. Every heartbeat was louder than the last. One ship against thousands. One fragile vessel against the greatest armada in the galaxy. The Council waited for Kane's answer. His crew waited for his command. The universe itself seemed to hold its breath. And in that frozen moment, the truth became clear. This was not just a battle of ships. It was a battle of will. The humans had sent one ship, not because they were weak, but because they had chosen to stand. And the Council, for all its power, had just begun to feel something they had not known in centuries. Doubt. The Council's confidence and the human silence. The alien fleet stood like a mountain range across the stars, each ship glowing with energy, weapons pointed toward the lone human vessel. To the Council, victory felt certain, thousands against one. It was no contest. Inside the golden flagship, the generals leaned forward, their voices sharp with arrogance. "Why do they wait?" one demanded. "They should beg for mercy." "They will break soon," another said, his tusks clashing as he laughed. A single ship cannot carry the weight of a world. The Chancellor's chamber filled with cruel laughter, echoing against the tall crystal walls. The Council had ruled for centuries through fear, and this would be no different. But, even as they spoke, the lone human ship did not move. It hung in the dark like a shadow carved into the void. Its silence was heavy, its stillness unsettling. "Fire a warning," ordered one general. "Burn their shields, remind them who we are." But the Chancellor raised his hand again. His eyes remained locked on the face of Commander Elias Kane, displayed across the chamber. The man had not spoken a single word since the Council's threat. His silence was louder than shouts, and it scratched at the Chancellor's instincts like claws. "This human," the Chancellor muttered. "He does not look defeated." On the human ship's bridge, tension grew. The crew whispered in low voices. Screens showed rows of enemy weapons locked on them. Missiles, plasma beams, energy cannons, enough firepower to shatter moons. The young second officer bit her lip and finally asked, "Commander, why do we wait? Why not strike first?" Kane's eyes stayed fixed on the enemy fleet. His voice was calm, almost cold. "Because they expect us to break. And when we don't, that's when fear begins." The crew exchanged nervous glances. They wanted to believe him. They wanted to trust the silence, but they could feel the weight of the Council's firepower pressing down on their lungs like stone. One of the engineers whispered, "Sir, our weapons, they are not strong enough. One hit from them and—" Kane cut him off gently, without raising his voice. "Numbers mean nothing if you strike where they are blind." The crew fell quiet again, their fear mixed now with something else, uncertain hope. Back on the Council flagship, the generals grew restless. "They mock us," one shouted. "This silence is insult. Chancellor, order the attack." But the Chancellor shook his head slowly. "Not yet. They are waiting for something. I will not let arrogance blind us." A low growl spread through the room. The generals hated hesitation. But deep in their minds, a sliver of unease had begun to grow. The hologram of Kane remained on their screens, his face unreadable, his eyes steady. His silence had become a weapon, pressing against the Council's confidence like a blade at the throat. Finally, the Chancellor spoke again. His voice was sharp. "Human, I offer you one last chance. Kneel, and Earth will live. Resist, and your world will burn." On the human bridge, all eyes turned to Kane. His crew held their breath, waiting for their commander's reply. At last he moved. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned forward, but instead of speaking, he reached out and muted the channel. The Chancellor's voice cut off mid-sentence. The alien leaders blinked in disbelief. "He silenced us?" one general roared. "He dares—" For a heartbeat, the chamber filled with shock. No one had ever muted the Council. Not once in history. To do so was madness. To do so was defiance beyond measure. The Chancellor's golden eyes narrowed. His lips curled, not in anger, but in something deeper. Wariness. "This is no accident," he whispered. "They are not fools. If they sent one ship, then that ship carries something we cannot see." Silence returned to the alien chamber. The generals who had been so loud now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Doubt crept into their voices, their laughter now gone. Meanwhile, on the human ship, Kane sat back in his chair. He had not spoken a single word to the council. He did not need to. His silence had already broken their rhythm. "Commander," the second officer whispered, eyes wide. "You muted them?" Kane's lips curved into the faintest smile. Sometimes the strongest answer is none. The crew stared at him, uncertain whether to laugh or tremble, but something in their chests felt lighter. The fear had not vanished, but it no longer ruled them. Outside the ship, the void stretched endlessly. Thousands of alien cannons still burned, ready to fire. And yet, the human vessel did not move. It stood like a stone in a storm, alone, silent, defiant. The council could not understand it, and in that misunderstanding, cracks began to form in their confidence. For the first time in living memory, the armada of the Galactic Council was not laughing at its enemy. It was waiting, hesitant, uncertain, and afraid to make the first strike, and, somewhere deep inside the Chancellor's heart, buried beneath centuries of power and arrogance, a whisper of fear began to take root. This was not how the battle was supposed to begin. The human reveal, the Council armada, floated like an iron wall across the stars, yet inside their war chamber, silence had replaced laughter. The human commander had muted them, had denied them the voice of authority. No one had ever dared. The generals whispered in confusion, their pride cracking. "Why would one ship resist us so boldly?" hissed a scaled warrior. "They cannot win," muttered another, but his voice carried less certainty than before. The Chancellor did not answer. His golden eyes remained fixed on the screen, on the face of Commander Elias Kane. Silent, calm, like a statue carved from stone. The man gave nothing away, and that nothing was terrifying. Inside the lone human ship, the crew sat in tense quiet. Lights flickered and consoles hummed. The enemy's guns still glared outside. But Kane leaned back in his chair as though the danger did not exist. "Commander," the second officer whispered, "why do we keep waiting? What do we have that can face that?" She gestured at the endless swarm of alien ships on the screen. Kane's gaze shifted to her for the first time. His voice was quiet, but every syllable carried weight. "Because history fights with us." The crew frowned, unsure what he meant. But before they could ask, Kane reached for a switch on his console. A wide projection flared to life across the bridge, and for the first time his crew, and soon the council, saw what he had prepared. The display showed Earth's past, cities in ruins, soldiers standing in the snow of ancient wars, burning skies, mushroom clouds rising from shattered lands. The voice of history filled the air as Kane spoke. "We were born in fire. We survived worlds ending, not once but many times. Empires crushed us, disasters broke us. Even our own hands nearly destroyed us. But each time we came back." The council intercepted the transmission. Their own screens filled with the same images. Earth's bloody history played before alien eyes. They saw men and women rising from rubble, carrying the wounded, building again with burned hands. They saw civilizations fall and rebuild. They saw death, war, famine, and yet always the same thing: survival. The generals shifted in their seats, disturbed. For all their conquests, the council had never endured such endless suffering. Kane's voice grew harder. "You think numbers protect you. You think fear keeps you safe. But humans, we learned to live without safety. We learned to keep walking when everything is gone. We learned to fight even when we had nothing left." His eyes locked onto the Chancellor's image across the void. For the first time, Kane spoke directly to him. "You ask why one ship came. Because one is enough. One human carries the strength of millions who refuse to die." Then he pressed another switch. The human ship groaned and panels slid back. For a moment the crew held their breath. Then light poured from the vessel's hull. Strange symbols glowed across its armor, pulsing with energy not of ordinary design. The Council generals jumped to their feet. "What is this?" one barked. "New weapons?" snarled another. But the Chancellor's face hardened. His instincts screamed. "Not new," he whispered. "Something ancient." The glow sharpened, and hidden cannons extended from the human ship's frame, sleek, black, alive with fire. They did not look like Council weapons. They looked raw, dangerous, experimental. Weapons that broke rules of nature itself. One of Kane's engineers gasped. "Sir, are we really going to use it?" Kane nodded once. "They wanted fear. Let's show them ours is stronger," the Chancellor's voice thundered across the channel. "Human, what have you done? What power do you hold?" Kane leaned forward, his voice cold. "Not power. Memory. Every battle, every scar, every death humanity has ever survived, it lives in this ship. You thought you faced one vessel, but you face all of us." The council chamber trembled with uproar. Generals shouted. Some demanded immediate attack. Others whispered of retreat. Fear cracked their unity like glass under pressure. The human ship floated, glowing with unnatural fire. A single ship, yet it carried the weight of a species that had learned to rise from ashes. On the bridge, Kane gave his final order. His voice was calm, steady, as if he had been waiting his whole life for this moment. "Arm the system." The crew obeyed, hands shaking as switches were thrown. Deep within the ship, the new weapon awakened. Energy built like a storm inside. A cage, humming louder and louder until the walls shook. Outside, the alien armada shifted uneasily. Thousands of guns aimed, but none fired. The Council, for all its pride, hesitated, because for the first time, they were not sure. The human ship, small and scarred, glowed like a star about to explode. And across the Council's endless fleet, a whisper spread like wildfire, carried on every trembling voice. What if one is enough? The battle against the impossible. The void exploded with light. The Council armada unleashed its fury, thousands of beams and missiles screaming across the darkness toward the lone human ship. The stars vanished beneath fire. It was not an attack. It was an avalanche, a storm meant to erase one fragile vessel from existence. Inside the human ship, alarms shrieked, the bridge glowing red. Crew members gripped their stations, bracing for death. But Kane did not move. His eyes stayed fixed ahead, calm in the middle of chaos. "Shields to maximum," he ordered. His voice was steady, cutting through fear like steel through smoke. The hidden systems of the ship roared to life. The glowing lines along the hull burned brighter, and then the first wave of alien fire struck. Instead of tearing the vessel apart, the human ship twisted the energy. Cannons that should have destroyed it became rivers of light that bent around its hull, scattering into harmless streams. Explosions flashed across the void, but not on the human ship. Gasps filled the council chambers. "Impossible," one general cried. "Their shields cannot—" "Not shields," the Chancellor interrupted, his golden eyes narrowing. "Something else. Something new." The human ship finally moved. It surged forward like a predator breaking from the shadows. Its experimental weapons flared, launching arcs of raw energy. One alien cruiser exploded instantly, torn in half. Another was pierced clean through, its engines falling dark. The Council armada roared in outrage. Thousands of ships adjusted, circling, trying to trap the lone vessel. But Kane had already begun his dance. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered. The pilot's hands shook but obeyed. The small ship twisted, rolled, and dove, slipping between colossal blasts of fire. Every movement was precise, as if Kane could see the future written before him. The crew's fear slowly shifted into awe. We're still alive," whispered the second officer, eyes wide. Kane answered without looking at her. "Alive is enough. Alive means we can fight." The ship struck again. Beams of compressed energy lashed out, slicing through a destroyer. The wreckage spun into the fleet, colliding with another vessel. Chaos rippled through the armada. But the Council did not fall so easily. A chorus of alien voices filled the Chancellor's chamber, shouting for blood. The armada shifted into a new formation, tightening around the human vessel like a closing fist. The Chancellor's voice thundered, "Crush them! Show Earth the price of defiance!" The void filled with fire once more. Inside the human ship, systems screamed. Sparks rained across the bridge as the hull shuddered under impact. Warning lights flashed, shields failing, engines overheating, weapons drained. The engineer shouted, "Commander, we cannot hold much longer." But Kane's voice was calm, almost gentle. "We don't need to hold forever. We need to hold long enough." The ship veered suddenly, diving straight into the heart of the fleet. Alien ships scattered in surprise, unprepared for the suicidal maneuver. The council generals shouted in disbelief. "They charge us?" One spat. "Are they mad?" But Kane knew madness was a weapon. Fear and unpredictability had always been humanity's edge. The human ship unleashed another strike, an energy burst that shattered 3 vessels in one sweep. The crew watched in awe as the impossible unfolded before their eyes. For every alien ship that fired, another hesitated. Doubt grew like a shadow in the fleet. They had numbers, they had power, yet a single human ship was tearing holes in their perfect wall. The Chancellor's grip on his throne tightened. Rage burned in his golden eyes, but beneath it fear stirred. "This cannot continue," he hissed. "Destroy them now." Alien ships closed in tighter. Dozens of blasts rained down, and this time the human ship could not dodge them all. Explosions ripped across the hull. Panels burst. Smoke filled the bridge. Crew members cried out as sparks burned their skin. The engineer shouted, "We've lost our secondary cannons. Hull breach on deck 4. Kane stood, gripping his chair to steady himself. His uniform was torn, blood trickling from his forehead, but his voice did not shake. "Seal the breach. Redirect all power to the main weapon." The crew hesitated. One officer whispered, terrified, "But if we do, shields will fail. One more hit and—" Kane's eyes locked on hers, cold, unflinching. "Then we make the last hit count." She swallowed hard, then obeyed. The human ship slowed, its defenses weakening. The Council armada saw the chance. Cannons charged, glowing, brighter and brighter, ready to finish the battle once and for all. The Chancellor leaned forward, certain at last. "End them." But Kane raised his hand. Fire. The human ship unleashed its hidden core weapon. A beam of pure energy, white and furious, burst forth like the wrath of a dying star. It cut through the armada, slicing a path of destruction across dozens of ships. Vessels exploded in waves, one after another, until the void itself shook with the storm. The crew shielded their eyes. Even the council generals froze, struck silent by the impossible sight. When the light faded, wreckage drifted across the stars. Dozens of council warships were gone. A gap had been torn into their perfect wall. Smoke filled the human bridge. Systems sparked. The crew panted, trembling, alive but broken. And Kane stood unshaken, his eyes burning with the same fire as the weapon they had unleashed. The Council armada had numbers, they had power, but the lone human ship had something greater, a will that refused to die. And for the first time in centuries, the Council understood what it meant to be afraid. The fear of the Council and humanity's victory, the void was no longer silent. It burned. Fragments of alien warships drifted like broken bones through the dark. Flames crawled across shattered hulls, sparks flickered against the stars. Where once the Council's armada stood as an unbreakable wall, now a wound stretched, wide, a path carved by a single human ship. Inside the golden flagship, the Council chamber had lost its arrogance. Generals who once laughed now whispered in panic, their eyes darted from screen to screen, watching the impossible unfold. How can one ship do this?" one stammered. "They should already be ash," another growled, but his voice trembled. The Chancellor did not shout this time. He sat frozen, golden eyes wide, his grip trembling against his throne. For centuries, the Council had crushed worlds with ease. But now, watching their fleet burn, he felt something he had not felt in 1,000 years. Fear. On the human ship, the bridge was a storm of smoke and sparks. Panels burned, alarms wailed, and injured crew fought to keep the vessel alive. The hull was cracked, shields gone, weapons drained. The ship bled in the dark, yet still it floated. Commander Elias Kane stood at the center. Blood streaked across his face. His uniform was torn, his voice hoarse, but his eyes burned with defiance. The engineer shouted over the chaos, "Commander, we cannot take another hit. The next volley will finish us." Kane did not flinch. His voice was steady, carrying through the smoke like iron. "Then we finish them first." The second officer clutched her console, tears stinging her eyes. "Sir, if we fire again, we'll tear ourselves apart. The Corps can't handle it." Kane's gaze fixed on the Council fleet outside. His words came slowly, each one sharp as a blade. "Better to burn standing than kneel living." The crew stared at him, and in their fear, something greater sparked. Belief. Outside, the Council regrouped. Ships tightened formation around the Chancellor's flagship, weapons glowing, desperate to erase the lone human before its fire returned. The Chancellor's voice finally broke the silence. "End this. Now!" The alien armada fired. Beams of fire, missiles, and energy waves roared across the void. Inside the human ship, Kane gave his final command. "All power to the Corps. Fire everything we have." The crew obeyed, voices shaking, hands steady. Switches slammed down. Energy roared through the broken vessel. The ship trembled like it would tear itself apart. The alien barrage struck. Blinding light swallowed the human ship. For a heartbeat, it seemed gone, destroyed. But then the glow changed. The ship did not shatter. It exploded outward, not in death, but in defiance. The hidden weapon roared again, brighter than before, a storm of white fire that tore across the Council fleet. Dozens more ships vanished in flame. The blast ripped through the void, shattering their wall, striking even the edges of the Chancellor's flagship. The Council chamber shook, alarms blaring, walls cracking. Generals screamed, scrambling in terror. The Chancellor gripped his throne, eyes wide. This cannot be." And then the human commander's voice came across the channel, rough, broken, but unshaken. "You think we fear losing. You think we fear death. But you're wrong." The Council chamber fell silent, every alien ear fixed on his words. "We've already lost everything before. Cities, families, worlds, and every time we came back stronger. So here's your mistake." Kane leaned closer to the screen, eyes burning into the Chancellor's. "You think numbers keep you safe, but we don't fear hell, because we've lived through it. Can you say the same?" The Chancellor's breath caught. For the first time in centuries, his lips trembled. Around him, generals looked away, their arrogance shattered. No one dared speak. No one dared move. Because the truth was clear. The humans did not fight like others. They did not fight for conquest or for glory. They fought because survival was written in their very blood. The human ship, scarred and broken, still floated. Its crew stood alive, defiant, unbroken. The Council armada, though vast, faltered. Their guns lowered. Their voices fell silent. For the first time in history, the Great Council did not advance. They pulled back, ship by ship. Formation broke. The endless wall of power retreated into the void, leaving behind wreckage and silence. On the human bridge, the crew stared in disbelief. They had survived. They had prevailed. One ship against thousands. The second officer whispered, voice shaking with awe. "They're retreating. They're really retreating." Kane did not smile. His voice was low, steady. "They've learned the truth." The engineer, still clutching his burned console, asked, "What truth, sir?" Kane's eyes stayed on the fading alien fleet. His answer came like a promise. That one human is never just one. Silence filled the bridge. Silence filled the stars. But across the galaxy, a new fear spread through the Council's heart. Fear of Earth, fear of humanity, fear of a species that refused to die. And so, in the ruins of battle, with smoke still rising from a single scarred vessel, the legend was born. One human ship had stood against the Council and prevailed.